The following spotlight speaks on subject matter focused on mental health. Some portions of the conversation may include trigger words related to suicide and self-harm, such as cutting. Viewer discretion is advised. Good evening, good evening, good evening. Welcome to the Voice Spotlight. In keeping with mental health awareness, our invited guest is Dr. Leslie Rogers. We both have roots in the federal government, but she has expanded on something, and it definitely falls into our Mental Awareness Month and the mental health ministry that we're starting on the church. How are you tonight, Dr. Rogers?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Good, good, good. So, like I say, in keeping with Mental Health Awareness Month, I have been wanting to get you on for a while, and I'm glad it took a while to get you on because it fell right in the month.
Uh-huh.
So that is a good thing. So
Perfect.
we're going to jump right into it. But before we jump right into it, like I told our viewers, we have we both have roots in the federal government, but now you have, well, is it your passion? How did you get into mental health? I got ready to say because I think some people find go for their passion. What was it for you?
Well, I guess you disclosed that you were with the FBI, right?
Yes. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Most of the people at the church know.
Yeah. So that's where we've met. So I was at the FBI as an intelligence analyst, did that for about, well, I was at the FBI for 25 years. Um, and I was the employee assistance coordinator for the counterterrorism division. So, and that actually kind of solidified what I wanted to do.
Okay.
EAP coordinator, and working with folks. And it was such a rewarding experience, especially working with first responders and specifically FBI agents. So that created the passion. And then it was the what next, right? I knew I didn't want to become an agent, an FBI agent, and then I had passed my time because I knew I couldn't pass the physical.
Uh,
So I was like, "What next? What next? What am I going to do next?" So jumped out on faith. And when I say jumped out on faith, left my six-figure job behind to finish my doctorate, my internship and dissertation. Went to Memphis, Tennessee, which I loved, to do my internship, and then left there and was hired um, at the VA Medical Center in North Carolina, which is where I am now.
okay. Okay.
Now,
Good.
I'm not at the VA now. I have my own practice now, but I ended up working, and that kind of exposed me to other things in this space, and now I have my own practice.
Okay, so and we'll expand on the practice because though we're talking here and we're in Maryland, your practice is in North Carolina, correct?
North Carolina.
Okay, all right, all right. So let's get into some of the questions that I have here. Um, I'm looking at today's environment, and though to me it seems like we're seeing more and more people that are exhibiting um, mental health issues. But I think in doing the research for this, I'm also seeing people that are becoming aware of their mental health issues. I think just last week, Miss USA um, stepped down before it would have been her turn to hand over the reins. One of my favorite shows, Game of Thrones, one of the Jon Snow actor, Kit Harington, he also admitted that he was taking some time off because of mental health issues. So we're looking at an environment, I think, and looking at it from not from a clinical part as you, that I'm seeing more and more of these things. But then I started looking at it in a more grassroots level on just what it entails. So one of the questions that I had in my mind is some of the things that we exhibit in um, teenagers, maybe younger than I am, since I'm 67. Um, and I wondered, lack of confidence or low self-esteem, are they considered poor mental health issues or health issues?
Right. So I want to go back really quickly, if I can,
Sure.
just to kind of address um, the sensitivity to mental health concerns. You're
Okay.
absolutely right. I think it's always been there. People have always struggled. We struggle with mental health concerns, right? Um, However, I believe that once COVID happened, more people became more sensitive to mental health crises and issues, right? But we've always been in tune with mental health issues. There's been stigmas around it. There's been resistance toward talking about it. But I think COVID actually set the floor for us to kind of say, well, wait a minute, we're struggling here. The kids started to struggle in school. We started to realize that schools were support systems for children. And when they didn't have school, they struggled quite a bit, right?
Okay.
So we started talking about it. It was during COVID that a lot of folks took to different platforms to talk about mental health and mental illnesses. So I think that COVID for me was the groundbreaking, eye opener that, okay, people are struggling and we need to talk about mental health even more. So it's always been there. It's just, I think that we're more sensitive to behaviors now.
Now, when you say sensitive, is that word sensitive more geared to that we are picking up on it more, or that COVID alone made us more susceptible to the things that were going on in our heads?
Like hyper, like, right, we become more hyper alert or hypersensitive, meaning that, during COVID, people were committing suicide.
Yeah.
You know, people were, losing their jobs, families were falling apart, kids were struggling, being home. I mean, it was just a lot going on during COVID that some people don't know about, right? So I think that when you think about mental health and mental illness, I think that we've become more aware of its prevalence now, as
Okay.
opposed to before COVID. Although we knew it was prevalent, I think it was pretty, nobody wanted to talk about it as much
Yeah.
as we're talking about
Yeah.
it now.
Yeah. I think back in the day, if you saw somebody acting a little weird, he just crazy. But now you're
Ooh, I
more,
don't like that word. That's
right. So now you're more aware of, maybe it's a particular issue. We at Victorious Living Faith Ministries, we have for the last several years, um, did a lot of things with the homeless population. And dealing with the homeless population, we can see that some of the things um, that are out there, and why some of them might be homeless or staying homeless, or what. So we've been working in a offshoot kind of way with some of the mental health issues.
yeah.
But back to the question, is that
Okay.
lack of confidence or low self-esteem, what is that considered, I guess I should ask.
So um, we all have low self-esteem or lack of confidence to some extent, right?
Okay.
If you're saying you're not, then you're in denial. I believe, this is Dr. Rogers, I believe that we all struggle with low self-esteem and low self-confidence in some way. And it's usually based on experience, based on prior negative experiences.
Okay.
I put it on a spectrum, right?
Okay.
You can have either extremely low self-esteem, extremely low confidence, such as like with depression and other, disorders, or you can have extremely high self-esteem, like that grandiosity, extremely high confidence, such as with mania, with bipolar, or you can be in the middle. You
Okay.
have that healthy. I just put out something on the Facebook the other day, or yesterday, where I was saying, um, uh, I love my gray hair. I love me.
I
And
saw it.
yeah. So, you have to have that healthy balance in between of loving yourself and, being confident, because we can be our worst critics. Just because you have, I have low self-esteem sometimes. I'm not diagnosed with depression, or anxiety. However, I do have low self-esteem. And I have to realize that when I take my Dr. Rogers hat off, I'm Leslie underneath. And, there's things that, I compare myself to others sometimes, especially when I came in this space. This was an unfamiliar space for me. I'm becoming a doctor. And, even to go as far as I have come through school, I didn't have faith in myself. I thought that I wasn't going to make it, right? But that doesn't mean you have a mental disorder. It just means that you're human.
Okay.
And it means that, you go through life's challenges, ups and downs, bumps, and things of that sort. And, mentally, we all struggle sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you have a mental illness.
Okay.
I think that
So,
you do have a healthy balance. You can create a healthy balance.
right. So I had the questions marked down. So, um, one of my questions was, is it safe to say that everyone has a mental health issue of some type at different times in their lives? But um, I think you've kind of clarified that even something as low self-esteem or lack of confidence, as long as we don't stay in that arena
Yeah, I
and
think
keep
it's
that
safe
healthy
to
balance,
say.
like you said.
Yeah, so let's define, if I can, let's
Mhm.
define mental health and
Okay.
mental illness first, because I
Okay.
think when you talk about stigmas, people kind of shy away from that when you say mental health, because it has such a negative connotation to it, right? So mental health is how we collectively take care of ourselves. Mental health is how we are able to get up in the morning and show up in the world, right? Mental health is how we go to work and we're effective on our jobs. Mental health is how we take care of our children, how we take care of ourselves, how we show up at doctor's appointments, how we get physicals, right? How we show up in mental health or behavioral health appointments, right? How we take our medications, that med compliance. Mental health is just collectively everything,
Mhm.
right? How we take care of ourselves and how we're able to take care of others. And however, mental illness are diagnosable and treatable disorders. Mental illnesses are diagnosable and treatable disorders. So I often look at it, and I don't know if anybody else separates that out. I usually separate it out, right?
Mhm.
And I separate it out because of the stigma. So if you teach people about mental health, right, about the holistic part and self-care and all of that stuff, then you can create a baseline for mental illness to talk about mental illness. So I wanted to kind of define that a little bit. So in that case, again, we all go through things. You can't live in a world where there's so much, psychosocial stressors and everything going on. You see the news and everything else on. You can't go through the world not feeling anything, right? You have job stress. You have the stress of being, of your parents. You have potential stressors of being single, financial stressors. You can't go through this world without having some type of stressors, right? Mental illness, according to the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Disorders, which is version 5, which is what we use to diagnose, states that one of the criteria of a mental illness is that it causes clinically significant distress in day-to-day functioning. And I'm paraphrasing that. Clinically significant distress, meaning it impacts your ability to get up and function in the world. Remember, if mental health is our ability to get up and interact and function in the world and be engaged, right, while taking care of ourselves, mental illnesses interfere with that.
Okay.
So when you have depression, some people with clinical depression, it's hard for them to get out of bed in the mornings or anytime. They just want to, stay in bed. It's hard for them to be engaged with other people, right? Um, it impacts, the way they see themselves. They, all the messages that come in, they internalize it as being negative, a depressed person, right? The communications are all negative. Um, with respect to there's hopelessness and helplessness with depression. And depression doesn't mean that you're suicidal, right? All depressed people are not suicidal, right? And then you have anxiety. Again, I believe we have healthy anxiety. We have performance anxiety. We have healthy anxiety. However, when anxiety interrupts that ability to become engaged or to function on a day-to-day, it interferes with work, it interferes with life, because anxiety can be debilitating, right? That's when it becomes potentially a mental illness.
And you touched on anxiety, and you made me look at a different way. Because I think COVID made me anxious because I just didn't think that, I'm not, big buff guy, but I didn't want to walk through, life worrying about passing away, you know,
Yeah.
because of
Mhm.
something that, happened in my lifetime, But
Yeah.
but you did make me think a little bit on the different forms of anxiety. So
But you know what you're doing? You're normalizing it for not only others, but other men too. You're not the only person, male that have felt that way. I mean, COVID, when you looked around, there was only death. So, a lot of folks were, afraid, if I catch COVID, am I going to succumb, or am I going to lose a loved one to COVID? Because that's all you saw was death. So that's
right,
why I would tell people, they would say, well, how do I deal with this with my children? The best way to deal with it was to talk about it with them, because they're going to school and talking about it,
right,
right?
right,
So,
right.
like, kind of normalize that, like, Johnny, how are you doing? I'm feeling, and this is about, not even about COVID. This is about everything.
That's everything, right?
Um, you know, um, uh, uh, Sometimes I feel anxious, and this is how I feel. Sometimes my heart flutters, or sometimes it feels like, I can't breathe, or sometimes whatever those experiences are. Do you ever feel like that? Have you ever felt that way before? Kind of normalize it and validate it, so
Right.
that your children can start talking about those symptoms now, so that they can tell you how they feel and start to have those discussions now while they're early.
That gives me a thought because I've never talked to a guy about what he might have been going through during COVID, you know. Um, so that's another
Why is
spotlight
that?
for me.
Why is that? You just said, I never talked to a guy about it.
Um,
Why?
I guess it never came up. No, no one's ever the people that I know that have anxiety and are open to talk about it have been females. Not a lot of guys. And I thought this was something that goes back in the day because um I guess I came from a time when you had issues, you just dealt with it. You didn't talk about it. You know, you just, I guess, powered through it. But if you ask me why I haven't talked to a guy about anxiety and what he might have felt through during COVID, is I don't have an answer. I
Right. But you
truly,
know what? Now you're going to be hypersensitive about
oh
it.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's going to be, because we're having this discussion, it's likely going to be to the forefront now of your awareness.
I think it is. I think it is because I know of guys. I mean, it's a group of us that most of us have either retired and or moved on to different positions. Only one of our group that we call the brothers is actually still working for the Bureau. Everybody else has moved on. But we're close knit enough that I could bring this up in a conversation and we could definitely discuss it. And like you said, I think that's what's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen.
Good, thank you.
So, generalized question. I don't know how good a question it is, but I have written down what form of mental health issues are not acknowledged by the general public as being a mental health issue.
Um, well, I don't think, that mental is not acknowledged. I'm sorry, I have allergies, guys. Oh my
No,
goodness.
I don't worry
Um,
about it.
yeah,
That's why I have a I like to offer you a water, but I can't.
okay. You got to come in here with one, but that's okay. Um, I don't think it's so much of it's not acknowledged. I think that, and so every one of us define mental health and mental illnesses differently, based on how we were reared, based on cultural, And then based on societal, what society says about mental health,
Hmm.
right? What organizations say about mental health. And but our first introduction to it would have been when we were children growing up. So like you, and when you said earlier that you didn't talk about it in your family, well, men didn't talk about it in my family much either, in a Black family, right?
Right.
Because they didn't have to think about, they didn't have time to think about mental health or mental illnesses. They had to take care of the families or work or etc. And then we had churches, and then churches back then didn't really recognize it, right? So when you say, what type of persons, what type of mental illnesses aren't recognized, I don't think it's recognized. I just think that people are ashamed to talk about it. Whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's the harder, the more severe mental
Hmm.
illnesses. And I
Right.
put things in spectrum, uh, mild, moderate to severe, right? So like your schizophrenia and more psychosis. Um, People they're um, not intelligent in those areas. So they call the people crazy or whatever you want to say about them because you're not knowledgeable of them. It's not that you're not acknowledging, you're acknowledging that there's a problem, but you just don't know how to address it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't think that we're not acknowledging. I just like, how do you address it when you don't know, you don't know much about it, about the disorder.
Okay. So being where you are in the field, um, and again, things we don't talk about or we kind of um, push it to the side, either for our own well-being, not wanting to get in um, involved with someone with it. Um, and again, this is something that came to me. And being who you are, is it hard to diagnose when it is a mental issue and or emotional issue
So when it's a mental issue and what?
or an emotional issue? Because I guess some things are because your emotions have gone into overdrive. And it are they one and the same or are they different? Emotional and
Right.
for
And
mental health issues.
that's a good question. So again, remember, we go back to that criteria. It has to be clinically significant, you know, has to cause clinically significant distress, and
Hmm.
it has to impact or interfere with day-to-day functioning, right? So no, that would make it's not really difficult to diagnose, because if a person comes to see you, then that means that it's impacting them in some way that they might feel helpless
Okay.
toward whatever is going on in their lives. When they get to me, when they get to a mental health professional, because again, there's stigmas about seeing professionals like mental health, behavioral health professionals. So by the time they get to a mental health professional, then either they've arrived at themselves or somebody have told them through support, um, that has become an issue and is problematic potentially, or is impacting their lives in such a way that, so to answer your question, no, it's not a difficult. So emotional and mental health, is that what you said? You said emotional is what different? Emotional
Well,
and
is diagnosing an emotional problem as opposed to a mental health issue. Uh,
yeah. So emotional, again, we all become emotional. We all have emotions. We all become angry. We all become sad. We all become um, overwhelmed, right? We all have a variation of emotions. So no, I think that with mental health, you might talk about it because again, we're talking about what's normal, and I'm normalizing this now because we all have different experiences. It doesn't mean that we have a mental health disorder. And I will say this, I've had people come to see me because they were so stressed for work or something else, and they just came to me to um, teach them coping skills, and they weren't diagnosed with a disorder because they didn't meet criteria. All they needed was, and then there's like, for instance, if somebody's grieving the death of a loved one, right? They're not necessarily diagnosed with depression, right? Because there's sadness and succumb with sadness and anger and all that guilt. They might come to me so that I can walk them through like maybe the 5 stages of death and grief, right? And then once they can get through that process and reach recovery, then they're okay. But they needed help to walk them through that process of that grieving process. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're diagnosed with depression or anxiety or bipolar or one of these other disorders, right? So again, most important thing to understand is when you're diagnosed, that means it's impacting your life in some significant way, that it's interfering with work, it's interfering with other engagement, like maybe at home or with your children or etc. But it is impacting your life in such a way that you know need to talk about it and kind of process through it.
Okay. So from a layman point of view, I mean, when someone comes to you, they've either come to the realization that they need someone in your field to help them out, or someone's pointed them in your direction. A lot of times, I think that's probably the case, and I don't know, but as a man, I'm always going to say, "Hey, I'm okay." So, um, from a layman issue, how do I address? I notice that a person is going through something. They're not themselves. They are acting out of character, or whether it's low keyed or high keyed. What could you tell me as a layman how to address a person who could be in a mental crisis of sorts? Um, but when you ask them something, they said, "Oh, I'm okay."
Right. Exactly. So what do as people, what do we first do? When people come to us with their problems, what do we do? How do we respond? We what? It starts with a J. We
It
judge.
starts with a J when somebody comes to me with their problem.
Sometimes we judge because we as humans are judgmental,
That is
right?
correct.
So and that's why people, such as you men,
I can't, again, I can't defend it. So yeah, go ahead.
you know, and that's why, there's so much guardedness and resistance toward speaking openly about mental illnesses because there's so many stigmas and gender stigmas that evolve around gender. How we define being a man. There's so many intersectionalities to being a man, woman. Like for instance, a man, for instance, intersections could be you're not only a man, you're a black man, you're a working black man, you're a father, you're a grandfather, you're pastor at a church, and you have all these intersections that come together, right?
Right.
So when you talk about supporting people, you have to think about, your own biases about mental health and mental illnesses. You have to think about your own biases toward different cultural groups, right? How can you support a culture or cultural group or someone that comes to you with a mental illness if you can't recognize your own biases? We all have biases. We all come with biases, right? Every single one of us come with biases, right?
Okay.
But it's kind of hard to recognize, our own biases for many different reasons. So one thing is to approach the person with compassion and non-judgmental, non-judgmental and authentic compassion, right? That could come with just listening. So again, we talk about anxiety, and I feel a lot of times we don't listen because we have anxiety because we don't know how to deal with what they're going to say to us. Like for instance, suicide, right? You might hear a person say, "Girl or guy, you need to get up and get outside. You're not suicidal. Just get outside and go running, or just go to church, go pray, or just go do this."
Right. Right.
You're not listening to them. You're invalidating what they're telling you they're feeling, right? So, and we do a lot of invalidating. So another thing I would say is try to figure out how to validate what they're saying because it might not be your truth, but it's their truth,
Okay. So
right?
you said a new word that I've never heard, biases. So could you
You've never
describe
heard
what that is?
that. Mm-hmm. Our biases are like how we like stereotypes, internal stereotypes that we feel about other people.
Mm,
Like for instance, biases. I feel that uh, if you come to me with tattoos and a hood on, you're a drug dealer,
right.
right? So our biases, or uh, you know, if you hmm, there's different types of biases. I'm trying to think of another one. Um, yeah.
But
So it's
I understand what you mean. And
what you things that you think about yourself. I mean, you things that you think about others, right? That might not be accurate. They might be stereotypes, putting people in a box, right? A bias about mental health. Oh, um, for example, a person with schizophrenia, um, all schizophrenia people are homeless, you know, or all schizophrenia people are dangerous, right? So then you might come across a person that may have some psychotic symptoms, talking to himself on the street or etc. And the first thing you think, oh, I better get away from him because he's dangerous, right? That's your bias toward homelessness or etc. Maybe the biases are towards men, which we talk about stigmas too, but the biases toward men. Oh, if he's saying that he's depressed or he's crying, right? He must be gay, or he must not be a real man. He must be weak because he's, the biases that come along with, again, how you are raised to believe how the world is supposed to be or how others are supposed to be. And it comes with each person, when I talk to you guys, and I work a lot with men in trauma. First thing I have them do is work to define who they are as a man, because that'll give you a lot of information, who you are as a man, right? And then that will, once you recognize who you are as a man, then you can determine what biases do I have if the other man isn't similar to how I am or my definition as a man, right? So then it would make sense that if somebody came to talk to you, another male came to talk to you, and you were like, man, you get on, or, you don't need to be doing that because of your biases toward how he's supposed to act as a man, right? So when you go back to this question as to how do you support other people with compassion, by listening, by being validating, right? Validating comes along with listening, by being non-judgmental, right? And then having resources available. Like for instance, star 988 is a crisis line, right? Star 988 is a crisis line for, mental illness and crises. So knowing resources, what resources are in the community, and or being supportive. Like if there's you guys at church, what resources do you have in church to support persons, right? Is there like peer counseling or something, so knowing what resources are available. But I think the first thing, because let me tell you, I've done groups with men, and I'm not trying to stay on this, but I've done groups with men, and everyone will come in here and not say anything. But as soon as one stand up and disclose something, then the others feel validated, and they will say, because I've had men say, "Ooh, I don't need to be validated," and then my response was, "Oh, you're telling your story, so you were just validated by this guy standing up telling his story. You were right." So being able to validate others, because they will come back for support if they feel that they're not judged. And this is anyone, right? Even kids. If you shut kids up, then that's how they will grow up, and they'll learn to hold stuff in. And that's when you become at risk for mental illness, because now you're holding stuff in and you're learning unhealthy ways to cope with certain situations.
I understand. Okay. Um, and give me a second. I want to read this over because you've opened up doors, and you've given me a few questions in my head, but I want to go through this. Uh, okay. So I had put down suicide seems to be more prevalent. Some are using it as an option when circumstances and situations become overwhelming. And since it seems that some of these people up to this point seem to be very well grounded, is it do the circumstances and situations push them into an issue, or and I asked this question because you've opened up a lot of pathways in my brain. Um, has that been an issue for them underlying, and or like you said with COVID, a situation or environment opens up where it changes the way we think about ourselves and the world, I guess I should say, or ask.
Wow, yeah, I hear you. You
That's a
said
lot. I know.
No, I have it written down too. You said people that are well grounded. You know, when you're thinking about suicide, you're not well grounded. At that point, you know, you're unstable, mentally unstable and emotionally unstable, and you feel like, I would imagine, feel like there's no other outing or no other recourse, right? For a lot of different reasons. This person may commit suicide that you might say, what did he kill himself over that for? You know,
I
and
think that has come through my head
right
on occasion. Yeah.
now, and another person may uh, take their lives, and you might be, wow, if I was in that situation, I don't know, I probably would have taken my life too, right?
Mm.
So, you know, or considered it. So everyone's experiences are different. There may be similarities, but everyone's experiences are different. The way you may respond to something, I might not respond that way. The way I respond to something, you might not respond that way. So nothing is ever silly, because remember, what a person is going through is their truth, right?
Right.
And that's how you support someone. What a person is going through is their truth. So if a person feels that um, whatever their experiences are has gotten to a point where they're thinking about ending their lives, that's their truth. That's their truth. So then, you know, you ask this question, well, what is it to push them over the edge? You know, again, um, I think research shows that finances is one of the top reasons for suicide, financial distress. Um, Other, you know, we think about populations, law enforcement, first responders are high in suicide, military, um, you know, um, and other, you know, other areas. I'm not going to quote right now because I don't have a research in front of me, but you know, what I will say is, you know, everyone's situation is different, and if they've gotten to that point. Now, I do want to say, you know, a lot of people get this confused: suicide versus self-harm behaviors, right? Suicide versus self-harm. A lot of people like self-harm, engage in self-harm behaviors, such as cutting or, you know, things like that. And you often see it in like trauma histories, like sexual trauma or trauma histories, right? Um, you know, maybe probably if you were to upload this video, you might want to put a caveat saying that, you know, there might be some trigger words in here. But you know, sometimes people will self-harm, you know, to mask the internal pain that they feel from the trauma that they've experienced. However, it's absence of the intent of killing themselves or taking their lives, right? So I wanted to, I thought that was important to talk about, because just because a person engages in children, you know, mostly children and adults will do it, but when a person is engaging in self-harm behaviors, it doesn't necessarily mean that they want to end their lives. And most often it's not the case. However, it's at risk because, you know, you can, when you're cutting, you can accidentally cut a major artery or a major, you know, vein or something like that. So it's still serious, but you know, the intent to take your own life might not be there, right? So suicide and self-harm behaviors are different.
Right.
I thought that was important to say.
Um, just recently, my wife and I looked at a movie, a series called The
Mhm.
Girl from Plainville.
Really? Mm-hmm.
And I guess well, where the movie main focus is on the girl's, um, her involvement on the guy committing suicide. Um, but in preparation to talk to you and Reverend Kier, who I spoke to last week, who's the mental health advocate, I started looking at it because this young man, he didn't want to be talked out of it. He justified his quest toward suicide, even though he tried to back out. And the case is she was that catalyst for pushing him back into the situation. But um I'm listening to you now and what when to pay attention what people are saying and what they're doing and to um really don't um underestimate them and what they're feeling and don't kind of disregard what they're feeling because like you said that's their truth.
Yeah.
So
And it's subtle behaviors too that you want to, pay attention to. And I will say, the difference between, and this is important for you too, being in a organization such as your church, being able. So I changed, when I was at the FBI, it was this suicide prevention thing, right?
right.
And I to change that name because I don't agree with suicide prevention because I believe that if a person really wanted to take their lives, they will do it and you won't know. And I believe that when they come and disclose that they're suicidal, that they want help, right? Because they're disclosing it because they can do it without you knowing it. So I don't like suicide prevention because it puts a lot of responsibility on the person, the loved one. So if the person actively suicides, then the loved one is left feeling I could have prevented it, right? So I don't use that. I like to use suicide awareness because I think that the important part is to create awareness around suicidal behavior, what that may look like, what the subtle signs may be. Persons giving away possessions and they're not sick or going through an ailing health, right? But they're giving away possessions or they're starting to isolate, withdraw off to themselves, or, there's a lot of subtle behaviors. They're talking about death and dying or, subtle behaviors like, and some people are, may have suicidal thoughts without even having a plan, right? Without even, they might feel that, you know, um, one I hear all the time, a lot, frequently, if God took me away tonight or tomorrow morning, I would be okay with that, right? So they don't have a plan to take their own lives, but they would be okay if they would just go to sleep and just not wake up, right? Again, the
Oh,
pain that, the pain that you're going through, and a lot of folks, they might not have a plan, and that's where, you talk about those behaviors and talk about and how you can support. And that's scary. That's a scary topic. So what do you say when somebody says to you, you know, um, uh, if I just don't want to live anymore, then, a natural reaction would be, oh, that's so silly. Come on, life is worth living. What are you doing? Right? Come on. And then, but it's invalidating to them, a person who, and so you just invalidate that person. My response would be, and teaching you guys, it sounds like what you're going through is really tough, especially when you're thinking about not wanting to live. And, it sounds like that's really tough, a really tough place to be
right. And I've heard that before. Actually, I've heard it in the last few months.
in. Mm-hmm.
So that gives me a lot to think about. Um, and we're not going to stay on suicide. Actually, we're coming down to the wire here. But I think I've stated it before. One of the things that really bothers me is these kids that use that option when they're being bullied. Um, it bothers me when I hear it that this kid that might be at the top of their game and, might be a regular brainiac in school, but the world around them make them feel less of themselves because they are being smart, because they are trying to learn. And you see that this person has committed suicide because of bullying, and it's of course any suicide is a waste of life to me. Um, but these children haven't grown, they haven't experienced life, but the ones that are doing the bullying, there are issues that need to be looked at with them, correct?
Yeah. So that's a great question too. So, I agree with you. I don't believe the schools do enough. Sometimes I think schools turn their head to bullying. And it's just so, oh my gosh, it just makes me so angry and disappointed. But of course, so imagine you're going through so much, right? and you don't want anybody. Like we all, I had this thing to say we all, because in certain instances, we all go through similar experiences, right? So I'm not going to say we all this time. I'm going to say many of us. Many of us wear masks. You don't know who I am because every single day I go out of this house, I wear a mask in some way. You know, I'm Dr. Rogers when I work. I'm Leslie when I'm not working. You know, the owner of Mental Health Talk when I'm the mother of 32-year-old boy. I was gonna say kid. He's not a kid. I'm all these people, right? But no one knows what I'm going through inside, right? So what I do is when I have my mask on, I go out and I project on other people. So I may make you feel horrible. I may, be mean to you or call you names, or I might to deflect who I really am, or to deflect from what I'm really going through in my home. Kids, they handle things differently than from adults. Their coping skills are different from us as adults, right? They keep themselves safe, right? The idea is to keep themselves safe, but keeping themselves safe maybe through defiance, oppositional behaviors, maybe through bullying, or maybe maybe through being more I forget the word, being more passive and withdrawing and off to themselves, right?
Mhm.
But yes, when you're talking about a bully, research has shown that oftentimes the bullies go through things themselves. Either they're being abused at home, violence at home, or something is happening in their life, or likely happening in their life, that they're likely projecting on other kids. And so they don't want people to know that they're weak and they're falling apart. So what do? They beat up the weakest kid, because now the attention isn't on them, the attention is on somebody else, right? And I remember growing up, and this makes sense because I understand this now. I remember I was bullied as a kid because I was the smart one, and they took me out of class and put me in one of the top classes for making all A's. And my best friend at the time wanted to fight me after school. I'm going to fight you after school. But I remember being bullied, and Grace chased me home all the time, James, all the time. And I remember my mom or somebody saying to me, Leslie, you have to stand up to her. And I was like, "Ooh, no, she's going to beat me up." But I understand now, because what you're doing is you're reinforcing them and their behaviors every time you run. You're reinforcing, because again, they're deflecting away from them and what they're going through potentially, right? So it wasn't until I stood up to her, and I shouldn't say this, guys. So I remember picking up a pencil in my hand and saying, "If you hit me again," and we were face to face like this,
Right.
she probably could have knocked me out. But I stood in her face now, and I was shaking in the inside. I was like, "If you hit me again, you will get hurt." And after that day, she never chased me again or beat me up again. And I understand that, because she couldn't risk me now defending myself and making her look weak.
Right.
Because what if she would have, proceeded to attack me, and then I retaliated and she got hurt? Now she's the weakling,
Right. Right. Right.
right? So I believe, and this is again my belief, I believe that, when people bully, whether you're a child or adult, and when you sometimes people can engage in humor to deflect off of what they're really going through, right? Because they don't want to be the center of attention, because then we really see how vulnerable they are, and how, weak, you know, they are, or whatever they're going through, right? So yeah, you're absolutely right. Bullies, bullying behavior and other behaviors can potentially be because they're deflecting off of them, and their truth and what they're really going through.
Understood. Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. It's so much that I've seen, done, thought, that now I can put it in its correct swim lane, I guess I should say. The
No,
last
kids, don't go out there and pick up no pencil or nothing.
no,
Go to the teachers.
no, they get in video game battles now.
Don't
Maybe
talk to
I don't
teachers
know.
if you're being bullied. Talk to your
But
teacher, your parents.
right, but I mean, I have I have two grand, three, four, well, I have four grandkids in school. Two are in Texas, and I don't see them that much, but I have two here, and I worry about how they are going to be in a which should be a learning situation and allowed to learn because just like you said, I don't think schools are doing enough for bullying. I mean, my personal belief, they're not doing enough for learning in it either, but that's my personal belief. But
Yeah.
um, there are things that, you know, though my kids are grown, I do worry about my grandkids, so I understand that.
Just keep the communications open. When the kids are younger, you have a bigger influence on them than when they start getting to school and being around peers. And then, the influences are between you and the kids at school and the teachers at school. And as they grow older, then they kind of wean away from you guys and their influences again. But you set a good foundation for them and talk to them and open and honest discussions, compassionate, age appropriate discussions. They should be fun.
Good. I appreciate it. Well, I think we've covered quite a bit here. And I don't know if we can be on a lighter note, but you brought up um your mental health talks. I've
Mhm.
seen your website. I'm wearing one of your shirts.
Let me see which one do you have. Let me see. The only person that can give up on you and make a difference is a you. Yes. Oh, that is amazing. Thank you for your support.
No problem. So tell us about mental health talks. Tell me about your website, and we don't have to get along into it because as you know, buying this shirt, you have merchandise. I'm trying not to be like these young kids with this merch.
Okay.
But you have an online store. Let's do that. That's an adult way of saying it. You have an online store, and you have magazines, and you have a website. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so mental health talk without an S is mental health talk is where we work to increase dialogue around mental health and overall well-being. We promote dialogue. I go different places. People contact me to come and speak um, for various reasons. I do a lot of trainings. People contact me to do self-care like mindfulness, meditation, and relaxation, and things of that sort. So mental health talk is like this huge umbrella where I have different components under it. One is the Mental Health Talk magazine, which is amazing. We publish, I am the publisher and chief editor of that magazine where we come and talk about mental health and mental illnesses. And the questions that you brought up today are somewhere in those magazines. It's a fabulous project. Not only licensed professionals write in there, but people like you, everyone can write in this magazine, right? And we're always looking for writers to talk about mental health experiences. Also, we have the bookstore, which is a virtual bookstore. We have books and tools in there and resources to include the Mental Health Talk magazine, but we have anxiety books for kids. We have a book in there for ADHD, learning about ADHD in children. We have adult books in there for anxiety, self-help books, first responder books we have in there. And lastly, I have the Men Suffer Too, exclamation mark, retreat that's coming up in October. I think it's going to be in, we're looking at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We're going to have a mansion, have a chef, and then there's going to be men there. And it's going to be amazing. We're going to talk about mental health, mental illness. I'm going to have a medical professional there teaching the men how to check heart rates and talking about preventative measures. I'm going to do mental health. We're going to teach men self-care. And we're just going to break down these walls. And there, men are going to talk to each other about mental health experiences and what they believe and how they define mental health and mental illness. So that I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to be amazing. This is the first one, and I'm looking forward to
And when is this taking place?
in October. So we have a GoFundMe page up where people are contributing to help pay for, many of the projects under Mental Health Talk. So if you go to www.mentalhealthtalk.live, LIVE, you can read about me, my mission, and then you can go in there and also contribute to the GoFundMe page and the bookstore and the magazines and stuff like that too.
Okay, all right. So it took a while, but I thank you for coming on tonight. It gives me a lot to think about. Um, with the formulation of the new health ministry at the church, um, I definitely want to be a part of it. And at some point, I may put you and Reverend Key in touch with each other. Um, and, whatever we can do to help somebody else.
Yeah.
So, anything in closing?
No, this was actually a great experience. Thank you for sticking in there with me. I know I can get a little busy,
That's
but I
busy.
try,
I understand busy.
whenever you guys want me, I love speaking about mental health, mental illnesses. And because what it does is, like you said, the light bulb moment happened a couple of times, right? So it helps to decrease stigmas and about educating folks is where you create that baseline, and that's what I'm here to do. So absolutely, thank you for having me and getting my word out there.
Well, I'm glad you left that door open because I will be tapping on you. Um, we have these months that we
Mhm.
go through and I think we need to push the point that sure it's a month of awareness, but this is a 24-hour day, 365 day a year thing for decades. Because if I can go back now and think about some things and I can think about some people um, that, what they may have been going through or how maybe a little bit of communication and understanding and listening, it could have been a different outcome. So
But before you do that, I encourage you to kind of sit back and reflect and meditate on, through prayer or whatever you do. But sit back and meditate and reflect on how you feel about mental health and mental illnesses, and what that looked like for you when you were growing up, and think about the biases that you have, because I think that's going to help reach a lot of people, because once you can think about how you feel about it, then you can approach persons with compassion, being non-judgmental.
yeah, I've had it in the family.
Hmm.
I still have one nephew, and I don't know where he is now. He actually worked with me for a while, but um, after several episodes, and
Yeah,
it's a lot of background on that. But I actually don't know where he is now. But I always pray for him. So right.
absolutely.
So thank you, Dr. Rogers. I would like to get you back on in a month or so. I would like more information that I can post for you on this retreat. Um, Definitely think it's a worthwhile thing.
Absolutely.
And we're hoping that the
It's going to be a
spotlight some
Thursday through Sunday.
Thursday
People
through Sunday.
buy it. Thursday is a travel day and Sunday is a travel day. So Friday, Saturday. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to say good night for now, and we
Thank
appreciate you being on, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Absolutely. I look forward to it.
All
Talk
right, good
soon.
night.